Well, welcome back to Finding Traction. And back in episode 75, called Win, Lose, Win, Learn, I introduced this whole idea of on-ramps, the idea of on-ramps to the porn superhighway, whether that would be your I-5 that runs down Western North America or the 401 or whatever your superhighway of porn is. We talked about on-ramps and learning what your on-ramps are. Well, today I'm going to introduce my friend John Fort, and we are going to talk about off-ramps today. So welcome aboard to Finding Traction.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Yeah, John, it's great to have you. Let me just say, for anybody who is looking at this coming year looking different than the last year, again, I want to introduce just the option of getting some coaching. I do individual coaching as well as group coaching. So if you want to connect with me, my email is bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com, and we can do a Zoom call and we can talk and find out what your needs are. And hopefully we can introduce you to a better 2023 than maybe 2022 went. So my friend John is here, and we are going to talk about off ramps. And just so you know, John, last about 2 episodes, we did this whole idea of on ramps, and those were the oftentimes called triggers or things that would kind of set you up for getting onto this porn superhighway. And how do you understand, first of all, on ramps? Is that what would be kind of the way you would describe that?
Well, the on-ramps, you mentioned the porn superhighway. Let's paint a picture of that highway. And so in your mind, imagine a circle. And at the top of the circle is your on-ramp. That's your trigger. So this highway is a loop that never ends and you never get off it. And I think a lot of people will understand that feeling like I can't get off. I'm going faster and faster around this circle. I can't get off this highway. So the trigger or the on-ramp is at the beginning. And so that's something that happens that can be it could be a traumatic memory. Something happens that reminds you of something that happened in childhood. It could be a difficult emotion, the emotion that you just never learned how to deal with. Back when you were a kid, you maybe don't, if you do a lot of work on your past, you may realize that you learned early on to use porn and masturbation as a way to deal with difficult feelings. You didn't realize that's what you're doing, but that's what happened. So a difficult emotion or negative narratives. Negative narratives are things that we believe about ourselves and tell ourselves, like, no one loves me, I'm stupid, I'm a mistake. Those kinds of things, they're not true, they're lies, but they're things that we believe. So something like that happens. Essentially, it's all a bad feeling. Some kind of bad feeling happens. That's the on-ramp. But then going around the circle, just real quick, let's go over this. Yeah. At the 3 o'clock position, there's something called preoccupation. That's that kind of trance-like state when it seems like all you can think about is sex and like everything reminds you of sex. So if you find yourself in that situation, you've already been triggered. You're already on the highway, that something happened. Maybe you weren't aware of it, that got you on this highway. So one of the things is a lot of men don't see the on-ramp. They're already on the on-ramp and they didn't know it. Okay. So preoccupation.
One of those roads that just kind of led them to that. Let me give you a quick example of that. It was about 3 days ago. I don't know what it was. All of a sudden I had this incredibly strong urge it was like a fantasy that I'm going, I wonder if I Googled that fantasy, if I would get a video. Mm-hmm. Like it was really strong. And it was just like, oh my goodness. And I didn't invite it, not that I'm aware of, but maybe something happened. But it really left me in a heightened state of susceptibility. Is that
right? Yeah, and so that state is preoccupation.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Then at the 6 o'clock position, the bottom is the ritual. So
Okay.
this one's a little confusing. I don't think we have a lot of time to go into all of this, but the idea is that all of us, when we are all sex addicts, have something, a ritual they do to put them in a place to act out. In other words, maybe consciously I can't say I'm going to look at porn, but I say, I really need to check the news, or I really
Right.
need to, some excuse to be on the computer, right?
Right.
Or,
Social media.
I really need, I need to get alone in my den. I need to go someplace, all these things we're putting ourselves in a position to act out. And we may not even admit it to ourselves. And we may even be saying, oh, I'm not going to look at porn, but I really need to, whatever. So we do.
Right.
Back in the early days of sex addiction recovery, most people who came to recovery help, porn was the least of their problems. They were going to strip joints and seeing prostitutes and that kind of stuff. And so like in those days, it was, I need to go out for a drive. I need to go,
Right.
I need to put myself in a position to act out. And then at 9 o'clock, that's the acting out. That's when, so we were triggered. Something happened to make us feel negative emotion.
Right.
We started feeling preoccupied about sex. We put ourselves in the position to act out, and then we act out. And then the acting out causes shame, which is a trigger, which is a negative feeling. And so you're right back on and you never get off. And so
Self-reinforcing.
An off ramp is getting off in between those four spots: the trigger, preoccupation, ritual, and acting out, and then trigger again. The farther around the circle you go, the harder it is to take the off ramp. Okay. So if you are preoccupied, it's much more difficult not to look at porn than if you have not got to that state yet. If you're already doing your ritual, if you're already getting by yourself and looking on the computer and you realize what's happening, it's much harder to do than if you just feel preoccupied.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So the farther around the circle you go, the off ramp becomes harder. So you can think of four off ramps all the way around this thing. Now, to use an off ramp, you have to medicate the problem or deal with the problem. So let's do some triggers, some off ramps, some on ramps, excuse me. Being alone might be an on ramp. When I'm alone, I don't like being alone. Okay, it feels bad. I feel rejected or abandoned or whatever. Failure at work. I fail at something at work. Insecurity. Something happens that makes me feel financially insecure or something like that. On the other hand, sometimes a trigger, an on-ramp, can be feeling great. I finished a huge project. It was really hard and I did really good, and I reward myself with porn. So they can be the opposite too. Or seeing something that reminds you of some past sexual situation. A lot of men who have porn issues have early sexual experiences as a boy, or maybe they were even sexually abused. Something happened, and something happens that reminds you of that. Okay, so those are different examples of on-ramps, right? Well, to find an off-ramp, each one of those has a different off-ramp. So to find the right off-ramp, you have to figure out what need is that about. So being alone, the need is I need to feel wanted.
Right.
Okay. So an off-ramp for that might be I reach out to one of my friends. Now I need to know that off-ramp before I feel alone. I need to say, when I feel alone, I'm going to call this friend and I'm going to tell him I might call you or text you or whatever, you see. And so and even if he's not there, just the fact that I got to reach out, I know he will hear me. I know he will respond.
Right.
That's an off ramp.
Failure.
Yeah. The problem with failure is to be valued. I don't feel valued. I'm worthless. I'm not good enough. Right.
Okay.
So again, we need to talk about that usually. So we reach out to somebody to talk about that. Insecurity, the need is to feel safe. Now, in my case, this might be different for each person. Okay, these off ramps that I'm telling you are just general examples.
Yeah.
For me, my safety was more related to God. I didn't feel like God was safe. Okay. And so for me to deal with safety meant I needed to start talking to God, maybe writing in a journal or just going off and talking with him and just telling him all the things I don't feel safe about. And then he instills peace in me that like, hey, I've got this. You don't need to worry about this. I've got this. Okay. The finishing a huge project. Well, what I need is a reward. I do need a reward.
Sure.
A lot of addicts get in this mind, I have to be stoic and my life is just going to be miserable the rest of the time and no happiness, right? Well, what's a good reward? Well, for me, being a coffee connoisseur, it's going down to a really good coffee shop and buying a rather expensive coffee drink.
Okay.
It could be different. Now, rather expensive is maybe $5, not breaking the bank. Okay, so we're not giving people an excuse to be financially irresponsible.
Well, that's
but for somebody
that's going to cause me financial insecurity and stress,
yeah,
and that's going to be an on-ramp in itself.
right. It might be going for a walk or a hike. It might be I'm gonna take this Saturday or whatever my next day off, and I'm gonna go on a hike. Whatever it is, it's something that you plan to reward yourself. And then the past memories of past situations, whether that's sexual or otherwise, that's trauma, and you probably need to see a therapist and be working through your trauma on that. I'm not a trauma expert. I've had trauma. I've been to a trauma therapist myself, but I don't practice doing that myself.
Okay, well, coach me on this one then, John, because like I say, 3 or 4 nights ago, all of a sudden I had this overwhelming thought, man, of this fantasy scenario. Now, I think it may have been out of a previous video I had seen that was close enough. And I had this overwhelming thing to try to find a video around this scenario. And it just kind of, it felt urgent. It felt powerful. And I can't think before that what set me up for that, but that was an on-ramp. So give me an example of how I could find an effective off-ramp for the next time that happens, because it will happen again.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest that something probably did happen before that.
Okay.
That made you think of that. Was there any, I don't want details of the fantasy, but were there any aspects of that fantasy that reminded you of something in your own past or something that you saw in the past or something?
Definitely something I saw in the past. It was a genre or a scenario that I had seen videos in the past of.
Okay, so what in those kind of, I get this from Jay Stringer, his work is that when we are drawn to a certain type of porn, that tells us what the problem is. Right. So if in that porn we are being submissive, in that, then maybe that's some kind of a situation to where we feel like we have to earn people's respect. So probably something before, if that's the case, something happened that made the person feel, oh, I'm not good enough. I need to earn people's value. I want to be sexually submissive to in that way. Okay. If it's powerful to where I am in a dominant situation, it may come from, I don't feel safe. My past doesn't feel safe. I'm not safe unless I'm in control. And so maybe something happened that made me feel insecure. And so I want to fight that with, my need is to feel safe in that case, to feel like I don't have to be in control. Everything's okay. And so it really depends, like the off-ramp depends on the nature of the pornography and what that's telling you about what you need to be wanted, like a submissive, to be wanted, to be cared about, to be good enough, or to be in control. Life is not safe enough. So, if it's a submissive thing, it's then it's like, okay, so what am I feeling not good enough about? And when I feel that, what do I need to do? And that might be different for different people. It might be call someone and talk to someone. It might be writing in a journal about the things I feel insecure about. It might, on the other hand, be making a list of things I'm grateful for. I did this the other day. I was just feeling really down. And so I started like last week, and I started to, I need to turn this around. So I sat down and just on a piece of paper wrote down all the things I was grateful for. And it turned into a very long list, and that just flipped it, because it's like, oh, I don't need to feel this way. So that could be it. To feel safe again, you might, the gratitude list might be what needs to be done. In other words, what we need, if you can't identify the need that the pornography is highlighting, you cannot have an off ramp.
Right. And just in our talk beforehand, you were talking about a bit of a distinction between behavior management, which is more just outward, which can be helpful as a starting point, but you're talking about moving into a level of either emotional or spiritual self-awareness, or you are talking about a degree of journeying here where you do understand the inner dynamics of what's going on.
Yeah. When I started recovery, 27 years ago, what I'm talking about, I would not have understood.
Okay.
That came later. In the beginning, I had off ramps, but they were like, get out of the house, go
Right.
for a walk. It was distracting myself, giving myself something other than porn to distract myself,
Right.
because I hadn't learned what my needs were. Like I hadn't learned enough to. It all just seemed to happen. It just seemed like one minute I was looking at porn, and how did I get here?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I don't remember. I did that highway. I didn't see the on ramp. I didn't see the preoccupation. I didn't see
Right.
the ritual. I didn't see none of it. And so, like in the beginning, it's like anywhere that I feel myself heading that direction, I need to distract myself, or tell somebody, or this kind of stuff.
Right.
And that is behavior management, and we need that in the beginning because we don't know enough yet. We haven't
Right.
done enough self-analysis to do anything else. But that is not a long-term solution.
Right.
It only and it uses up a lot of energy because I have to force myself to step away from the computer and go do something else to distract myself.
Right.
You know, so but I think most of the time that's where we have to start. And so we call it a substitution list. They're kind of off ramps, but like, what can I do instead of looking at porn?
Sure.
I can go play the guitar. I can listen to music. I can go to a friend's house. I can, you know.
Right. Okay, let me throw a different scenario. I like the cycle idea. Around the clock, I have different numbers, but I get that concept. Now, let me put it this way. One of the things and just to summarize, one thing you said is the farther we get around the circle, although it's possible, it's harder to find effective on ramps the further we get around that. Okay, let me just play a bit of a mind game with you here. Here's one of the things that I've heard from guys, and one of the things I've practiced myself. What do I do when I've gone farther than I've hoped? So let's say all of a sudden I'm clicking and now I'm looking at the early parts of porn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I can't even pretend that I'm just checking out my feed on Facebook or Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm looking at explicit material. Well, there's a part of me that goes, well, I've already started, John, so I might as well finish this to orgasm. And why should I even look for an on ramp when I've just begun that process? Is it even worth looking for an on ramp there?
Off ramp, I mean, yeah.
Off ramp. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say when you get to the point, at this point, your dopamine levels are high and all this other kind of stuff like that. To me, this is just my thoughts. Okay. So
yeah, fair enough.
Is that the likelihood of having the willpower to do an off ramp, even if you know what they are, you've already set them up.
Right.
At that point, see, when dopamine, let me just talk about dopamine for a second. At that point, dopamine's already flooded your brain.
Right.
One of the purposes of dopamine is to push all other feelings aside.
Okay.
We are designed to reproduce. Okay. And so dopamine happens, a lot of things can give us dopamine, but when what sex gives, like way higher levels of dopamine. And one of its purposes is to make you reproduce.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so what that means is any other distraction is shoved aside. All
right.
feelings are shoved aside, everything. And so like, to hone your focus in on reproducing, right? Your brain doesn't know that looking at porn is not part of reproducing. But so anyway, all that to say is that you've got the amount of willpower to override that level of dopamine is probably just not there. That makes sense.
Right.
And so I mean, if you can pull yourself away and whatever, but you still got this flood of dopamine, it's going to take a couple hours to go away.
Right.
And so then you've got to keep yourself, so you got to leave the house for like 2 hours, right?
Right.
Anyway,
well, okay.
So my thought is that you want to end the situation there. You've already crossed the line, but ending the situation is shutting your computer and going to the bathroom and masturbating as fast as you can, because then the dopamine hit's gone and you can get on with life. Then you take an off ramp there. Now that I'm not sure everybody would agree with me on that, but the thing about that is that you're not continuing to look or looking at worse stuff or whatever. You're ending it, and the only way you're going to end it is doing that. Now and if possible, you're not trying to think about porn or anything like that. You're just trying to get the climax over and dopamine gone.
Right.
And so that's the, but then, I can see people using that as an excuse to whatever. To my question to a person in that situation is, why is it still possible for you to see porn on your computer? You
Right.
see,
Well,
it's like when a person starts doing that, it's like, if we're in this spot, I have a lot of questions for you.
right. Well, that's the other whole next next time things we've talked about, learning experiences. Well, let me throw out one thing I have said to guys that I'd be curious to your feedback on. I have started to recognize with guys, there's a difference between, again, this is not a excuse. There's a difference between a porn event and a porn state.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've noticed with guys, they will have, slip sometimes is a minimizing word, but let's say there's a slip where they do end up looking at porn or something explicit, but then they quickly come out of it. They quickly call somebody and say, guys, I just screwed up, da 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 da. That is very different than what I've noticed with one guy. It begins a series of the next 1, 2, 3 days, 5 days, where they are so far down the rabbit hole. It is just event after event after event, deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, where it goes on for a series of not just hours, but days. I'm going, for me, that's a different scenario that I'm saying. That's why even going over the line doesn't mean then just let it rip and go as long as you can. Like, for me, that is problematic in an even worse way. If that makes any sense, trying to create a distinction with guys to say, well, then how quickly did you recover?
Yeah. When people are in a full relapse, that's what you're talking about. When my boss is John. I work for Be Broken Ministries.
Yes.
And Doherty is executive or president, and he puts it this way: we're on a journey to recovery. We're on a path, like a trail in the forest.
Right.
A slip is when we step off the trail.
Right.
A relapse is when we hike into the woods and set up camp.
Yeah,
so
I love it.
It's like, and so when you're camping out with porn for a few days, that's a relapse. That's not a slip, right? And so that takes different kind of intervention. That takes other people. In other words, basically, we have to say, I am stuck. I can't get out of this. I need help. People, and you have people in your life that you're accountable to that have the right to say to you, well, I need to get away from your computer for a while, or whatever. Sure. In other words, there are people that you've given permission to put the hammer down a little bit when needed to, not in the, but to come around, like an intervention, almost like we need to pull you out of this,
right?
And that kind of, and we may need help with that, right? So that's kind of a lot of people don't ever enter into those kind of relationships. They stay away from that because they don't. It's like an alcoholic always keeping a bottle of booze hidden in the house.
Right.
It's like you're not really in recovery until you have this stuff set up.
Right. Yeah, and I love that word picture of the trail and the camping in the woods, because in one sense, all relapses are not the same.
Right.
If we use in that way. And that's why even, sometimes it's that all or nothing thinking, which I think works against men when they say, well, I already looked at one woman, or I already looked at one 5-minute video. Oh, well, all is lost. And I might as well spend the next week looking at porn. Really? You know what I'm saying? No.
I do.
And that's
I think we've all thought that before. It's interesting. This reminds me of when I worked with my son, kind of along those same lines. And I think this happens with men too, is that when he, not long after he entered puberty, he came home from school and said, Dad, I messed up. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, well, there was a girl in PE and she was wearing short shorts and I messed up. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't understand. And I finally kind of act like, well, did you start imagining what she looks like naked? Oh, no. I looked away immediately. So did you come home and think about her and masturbate? If and it's like, well, what? No. And what he was trying to explain is he didn't understand what it felt like to be sexually aroused. But he assumed that feeling must be bad.
Oh my.
And so you think about that, there's sexual arousal, which can happen, or a trigger that can happen, anything that's just normal.
Right.
Then there's temptation, which is sort of that preoccupied state where it's like, man, I want to do something bad.
Mhm.
That is still not a sin,
Right.
right? It's when we act out. So here's the deal is I had to help him understand is when your body reacts to seeing someone attractive,
Mhm.
like even strongly, that is normal. We
Right.
should celebrate. Everything is working right. That
Right.
means, we have successfully entered into young manhood, right? This is
Right.
the way it goes. But when you feel, but that's not bad.
Right.
Because see, this is what the danger is, if especially for kids, and I think this is true for men too.
Mm.
When we start feeling tempted, that wanting to, it's like, well, I'm bad because I want this. Like that
Right.
fantasy you mentioned, I am evil because this thought came to my mind, this
Right.
scenario came to my mind. Therefore, what I might as well go ahead and see it through. It goes clear back to the temptation. Is like,
Right.
no, it is normal. Jesus was tempted in all things. That means he had to have experienced sexual temptation.
Right.
And so and we know he didn't sin, right? So we talk about it, we don't keep it a secret, right? That kind of takes the power away. But anywhere along this line, not all the way until you're, in a cycle of acting out, but earlier and earlier and earlier, we say, hey, I'm just having, if this is normal, a common experience with people, it's normal to have these feelings. It's normal to be tempted. It's normal to be sexually aroused. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Probably we should talk about it with somebody.
And John, I know that the people listening are going to find that. I find that a super helpful distinction. And I know guys will as well. You brought up your son. Let's transition. John, you've just finished writing a book. And I know that there's people who may be at this stage of life where the book you've just written could be super relevant and helpful. It's a book that you wrote regarding you and your son and some of your journey together around this. Just tell a bit more the name of the book and what the book's about, because again, I know there's people who could find this super helpful.
Yeah. Well, the first edition is called Father-Son Accountability, Integrity Through Relationship. The first edition of that we wrote when he was 15.
Okay.
And we just rewrote it last spring. He's 24 now. And we just rewrote it because we thought we could do a better job and a lot of upgrading it. And he this time wrote half of it. But we kept some of the things he said when he was 15 and then added parts and we're talking about how to help a teenage boy, or we started when he was like 11 or 12, but how to help him deal with all this stuff,
right,
to understand this kind of thing. So it's an 8-week study. The very tiny book. So there's only 10 minutes of reading a week. And the idea is you and your son read 1 week, you read 10 minutes together. Then it has questions for you to ask each other. It walks you through. It's helping a father-son start having conversations, not just about porn, but sexuality and everything in general. Now, we've had at Be Broken, we've had men do this with adult sons. Like there's a man who came, he was a porn addict and he got help, but his son was 26 and he was so excited about this. He goes, I know my son has a problem too. I want to talk with him. He did the book with his 26-year-old. Okay. I've also had young men get it and do it themselves with a friend. Do you know what I'm saying? Some of the stuff is geared towards what a 12, 13, 14-year-old is going through. But I think it could help. Like all the stuff we're talking about, it's all in the book, although it's in more simplified terms, because a 14-year-old's not an addict. They may act like an addict, but they're not yet.
Right. Well, and I think too about we live in there's so many fatherless kids that you could be 22 and not experience, being fathered like somebody who grew up in a, regular nuclear family kind of thing. And in one sense, in your development, you still may be seeing the world at 16 or 18.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's huge.
Yeah. Well, the one thing to watch is it's on Amazon is the original version. I tried to take it off, but sometimes you find it. The original version has a picture of a dock and water. The new version has it's all graphic, has an icon of a father and son in front. So just look for the one with the icon on it, not the dock.
The water dock. Okay, so you can
that one shouldn't come up, but sometimes it does.
Okay, so you can get it on Amazon.
Yeah.
And the name of it again is
Father-Son Accountability.
Okay.
And I have several books I've written, but weirdly that one comes up easier with my son's name. So you can also just type in Lucas, Lucas, Lucas Fort, Fort,
Okay.
and it'll come up.
Okay.
I don't know why Amazon likes him better than me for some
There
reason.
you go. John, it has been great having you, just to talk about on-ramps, off-ramps. Be Broken Ministry has been such a huge benefit to me. I listen to Pure Sex Radio podcast all the time with Jonathan Daugherty and his sidekick, I never can remember his name, but
Stephen Cervantes.
there you go. And he has a very interesting voice. He's just a really, I wonder if he's interesting as his voice is. So anyways, so Stephen and John and the other John, thank you again, John. It's been an honor having you on. And I just so appreciate the insight you've given me and hopefully the listeners as well. God bless.
It's been good to be on. Thanks.